January 9th, 2007, Steve Jobs walks onto a stage in San Francisco and delivers one of the most legendary tech presentations in history. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone, and they actually did it. This wasn't marketing hyperbole, they genuinely changed how every human being interacts with technology. For over a decade, Apple was the company that made you say, "Holy shit, I didn't even know I needed this." They didn't just sell you gadgets, they sold you a glimpse of the future. Every product launch felt like watching magic happen in real time. So what the hell happened? Because in 2025, we're watching the most valuable company on earth completely lose its damn mind. They're charging $3,500 for a headset that nobody asked for. Their AI assistant can barely understand basic English. And their biggest innovation this year was making the iPhone slightly thinner. Again, this is the story of how Apple went from think different to think, maybe we'll figure it out later. How the company that used to embarrass their competitors with groundbreaking technology is now getting called out by Mark Zuckerberg for lacking innovation.
They haven't really invented anything great in a while. It's like Steve Jobs invented the iPhone, and now they're just kind of sitting on it 20 years later.
Get ready, because we're about to dissect the spectacular decline of a company that once seemed untouchable. Let's rewind to when Apple actually gave a shit about innovation. In the late 90s, Apple was basically dead. They had maybe less than 90 days from bankruptcy and were making beige computers that looked like they belonged in a dentist's office. Then Steve Jobs returned and said, "You know what? Computers don't have to look like medical equipment." The iMac wasn't just a computer, it was a statement. It was sexy, it was fun, and it made you want to throw your boring ass PC in the trash. The iMac saved Apple from bankruptcy, but more importantly, it signaled a philosophy shift. Apple wasn't going to compete on specs or price anymore. They were going to make technology that people actually wanted to live with. Building on that success, Apple tackled the music industry next. This was 2001, and most people were either buying CDs or illegally downloading songs one at a time. The iPod didn't just store music, it stored every song you've ever loved in your pocket. 1,000 songs in your pocket wasn't marketing bullshit, it was a promise they actually delivered on. By 2007, Apple had proven they could reinvent dying product categories, but smartphones were different. This was a crowded, competitive market dominated by BlackBerry and Palm. Everyone assumed Apple would make an iPod that makes phone calls. Instead, Jobs unveiled something nobody saw coming. Not just a better phone, but a pocket-sized computer with an interface so simple even a toddler could use it. When the first iPhone launched, the crowd went wild, because Apple had just made every other phone on the planet look like a calculator. Watching competitors react to the iPhone was like watching traditional cab companies try to figure out Uber. They weren't just behind, they were playing an entirely different game. The iPad continued this pattern. Critics initially called it just a big iPhone, missing the point entirely. Apple had created the tablet market from nothing and then dominated it so completely that iPad became synonymous with tablet. By 2012, Apple became the most valuable company in the world. They weren't just making products, they were creating desire itself. Every Apple event was like Christmas morning for tech nerds worldwide. Then Steve Jobs died in October 2011 and Tim Cook took over. Now, don't get me wrong, Cook is a supply chain wizard who turned Apple into a money printing machine, but there's one tiny problem. The man has the creative vision of a fucking spreadsheet. The innovation started feeling more predictable. Instead of revolutionary leaps, we started getting incremental updates. Hey, look! This year's iPhone has slightly better cameras. Oh wow, revolutionary. Next you're gonna tell me the battery lasts 30 minutes longer. The iPhone 5 was thinner, the iPhone 5C was colorful, the iPhone 5S had a fingerprint scanner. These weren't bad products, but they felt like improvements rather than breakthroughs. Compare the energy of that original iPhone launch to recent Apple events. Jobs was selling you the future, Cook explains product specifications, and sells you last year's phone with a different number on the box. As Apple built their stunning new headquarters, something strange started happening. The company that once moved fast and broke things began moving slowly and, well, not breaking much of anything. When Apple finally unveiled something genuinely new, the Vision Pro, the response was polite applause rather than gasps of amazement. A $3,500 headset for spatial computing that most people couldn't even afford to try, let alone buy. You know what I call it? An expensive way to watch Netflix alone while your family questions your life choices. Early adopters described it as impressive technology looking for a purpose, cool demos, but unclear why you'd want to wear a computer on your face for hours at a time. The revolutionary product felt more like an expensive experiment. Meanwhile, their sales in China are tanking faster than the Titanic. Chinese consumers, once obsessed with iPhones, began choosing local alternatives that offered similar features at lower prices. Huawei, despite US sanctions, was gaining ground with innovative designs and aggressive pricing. While Apple focused on hardware refinements, the rest of the tech world was having an AI revolution. ChatGPT launched in late 2022, and within months had changed how millions of people work, learn, and create. Apple's response? Siri, their decade-old AI assistant, continued struggling with requests that any other AI handled effortlessly. Studies show Siri is 25 to 30% worse than newer AI assistants at understanding and responding to queries. This wasn't a small gap. It was a chasm that seemed to widen every month. According to reports, Apple's AI team looked less like a tech powerhouse and more like a soap opera with coding problems. Talented engineers frustrated by bureaucracy, projects canceled after months of work, and executives who didn't seem to understand the urgency of the situation. So Apple finally announces Apple Intelligence, which was presented as revolutionary. Except, it's not ready. The demo was clearly staged, half the features won't work until 2026, and the other half require you to join a waitlist like you're trying to get into an exclusive nightclub. They promised Siri would finally get smart. Then March 2025 happened. Apple quietly announced that those promised Siri improvements delayed until 2026. Some features might not arrive until 2027. Here's the kicker. Apple's own Siri chief called the delays ugly and embarrassing in internal communications. So they knew it was a disaster but kept marketing it anyway. Think about that for a second. Apple spent months marketing the iPhone 16 around AI features that still don't work properly. They sold millions of phones on the promise of capabilities they couldn't deliver. That's not innovation, that's false advertising with extra steps. While Apple promised future AI capabilities, Google, Microsoft, and OpenAI were shipping products that work today. Samsung's Galaxy AI was already helping users edit photos, translate conversations in real time, and summarize lengthy articles, features that actually functioned when you bought the phone. Meanwhile, Apple Intelligence was asking you to join a waitlist for the privilege of maybe getting basic AI features sometime in the next 2 years. The company that once defined the phrase, "it just works," was asking customers to wait for technology that competitors already offered. Apple's control over their ecosystem, once seen as ensuring quality, began feeling restrictive. Apple has turned their platform into a corporate prison where they take 30% of everything and ban apps for mysterious guideline violations that seem to change based on Tim Cook's mood. Epic Games literally went to legal war with Apple over their monopolistic bullshit. And you know what Apple's defense was? We're providing a premium experience. The European Union had to pass laws just to force Apple to allow alternative app stores and payment methods. EU even fined Apple over $1.8 billion over abusive app store rules for music streaming. Think about that. They're so controlling that governments had to step in and say, hey, maybe let people choose how they use the devices they bought. As a result, talented developers began focusing their energy elsewhere. Why build for a platform that treats you as a potential threat rather than a valued partner? The creative energy that once flowed toward Apple is going elsewhere. And now, Microsoft has overtaken Apple as the world's most valuable company. The company that makes Windows is now worth more than Apple because Microsoft embraced AI and cloud computing aggressively, while Apple were busy making phones 0.2 millimeters thinner. So here's where we stand. Apple has more cash than most countries' GDP, but they're stuck in a prison of their own making. They're so obsessed with perfecting yesterday's technology that they're completely missing tomorrow's opportunities. Compare any recent Apple keynote to those legendary Steve Jobs presentations. Where Jobs promised to change your life, current Apple promised slightly better battery life. Innovation didn't stop when Apple slowed down. It moved elsewhere. While they were busy making 17 different iPhone models that are basically identical, Samsung pioneered foldable phones, Google advanced AI, and dozens of startups tackled problems Apple ignored. Apple's responses to criticism increasingly sound defensive rather than visionary. They explain why their approach is better rather than showing us something we didn't know we needed. This raises the fundamental question: is Apple a technology company that happens to be profitable, or a profitable company that happens to make technology? The answer increasingly seems to be the latter. Perhaps most tellingly, younger consumers show less brand loyalty to Apple than previous generations. They would rather grab a Samsung or Google's Pixel than wait in line for Apple's so-called innovation. So, what the hell happened with Apple? They got comfortable, they got corporate, they got boring, and in tech, boring is the kiss of death. The company that once told us to think different stopped thinking at all. Maybe one day they'll remember what made them special, but until then, we're stuck watching the most innovative company in history become just another tech corporation counting dollars instead of changing lives. The revolution is over, and Apple lost.